Welcome back, everybody, to Be Good Leadership. I am Ronnie Caldwell once again, and I want to talk a little bit more about perspective in leadership and thinking about the whole picture, not just your own, in a long term way. So, I want to start with a story. So, years ago, I would say just about a year before COVID happened, I was speaking with a assistant principal who was struggling and having a tough relationship with their new boss at the time, the principal of the school. And when talking, I said, "Well, what are you struggling with most?" And she was a very passionate AP. She had been a passionate English teacher. She believed fervently in the workshop model, and she had come up doing Lucy Calkins, right? She had had teacher college training, and what she was having a trouble with is that this new school she had gone to, where she had become an assistant principal, was not doing Lucy Calkins at the time. And they had some type of, they didn't have a clear system. Each teacher was doing something a little bit differently. They were being able to pick and choose and do what they wanted to do. Her problem was she kept sort of pushing and pushing. Why wasn't the school doing Lucy Calkins? This was something that was very common amongst international schools. Many schools were doing it. When she had worked in the States, she had started in a school that was doing Lucy Calkins and workshop model. And her problem was the principal seemed like he didn't have a clear idea of why they weren't doing Lucy Calkins. They just weren't. And so she was talking to me about how it was hard working in a school that wasn't doing right by kids. And her fervent belief was that these kids are not getting the best education in terms of their writing education, reading, everything else. And she wanted to lead the charge in Lucy Calkins. And when she was trying to get her principal behind her, he wasn't very, encouraging or wasn't real excited about it. And then she was also having trouble with these different teachers and how they were teaching writing. And she was almost certain that they weren't doing right by kids. And I asked her at the time, I said, "Okay," I said, "you're new here." And she said, "I know I'm new, but I want to have an impact." I said, "Okay, great. All of us want to have an impact. Everybody wants to have an impact when they come in terms of leadership." I asked her a question. I said, um, are the teachers, are they complaining about how they're currently teaching writing and reading?" She said, "No." I said, "When you were hired, was their reading and writing program express did they express concern about it, or is it one of their strategic goals that they need to build upon it?" I said, "No, that wasn't talked about." And I said, "In terms of at your last school, what did they use as sort of a external assessment of how the kids were doing or growing?" She said, "Map testing." I said, "This school, the new school you're at?" She said, "Map testing." I said, "Great. Comparatively?" I said, "How are the kids doing on those?" She goes, are they, in terms of their reading, are they way behind where the kids were before in the school that you were doing, you know, um, workshop modeling?" And she goes, "Actually," she goes, "now that you mention it, actually, it's maybe a wash." I said, "Maybe this new school is even a little bit higher," she said. "So there's no crisis." And she's like, "Yeah, but I believe that this is the right way to do it." "But why?" "Well, because I've trained in this way." "Great. Have you done anything else?" "Well, no." "Are these kids actually being hurt? Do you have any data, anything besides the fact that this school is doing something differently than what you've done in the past to prove that there's a crisis here, or that the children are being hurt by not doing the writing and reading curriculum that you've been used to?" And we moved from that conversation. But over time, and since then, I've spoken to this, she's a principal now and everything else, and I've spoken to her again. And she recalls this conversation that we had. And the reason she recalls that conversation is that her entire mind has changed about how to teach reading or writing. And this is not to say that there's anything wrong specifically with Lucy Calkins. I know there's a lot of controversy about it, Science of Reading versus Lucy Calkins, all that kind of thing. I'm not here to speak about that. I don't think anyone should throw the baby out with the bathwater, and there's no one system that does it all. And probably people need to mix and mesh and figure out what the students need is most important, regardless of what curriculum they're going to be using. But the key idea here was this, that there was a lack of perspective followed, and that what she was losing is what many new teachers and new leaders lose when they go to a new place, because there's a comfort level that's based around a type of insecurity where it would be easier for me to just make this new place look like the old place. I want this new place to do because I'm scared about my own ability to adapt, to learn, and to lead in a new environment. It would just be easier if they just did everything that I already knew. And so we have a tendency when we go to a new environment, when it is doing something different, and when we're feeling actually insecure, and when we're feeling a little bit not up to it, maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome, to make it a crisis for the new place. But just because something is different, just because something is being done not in the way that you've seen it done before, does not by itself mean that there's a crisis. It does mean you need to learn. It does mean you're going to have to observe, ask real questions, listen to learn, and to wonder if, and just find out how these people are also probably doing it right. The world is so complex that there is rarely one way to solve a problem. There's rarely just one way to meet a similar goal. I like to use the example of sports teams all the time. We're okay. We're very okay with the different types of coaches in different types of sports. And no one has a problem if, as long as this coach is winning, because the key idea, the key assessment is, are the players learning to play in such a way that they are successful in the games? Are they winning in the game? When you have that, and there's a clear measure there, then we're okay with different styles of coaching, as long as it's effective. Just as in a school, I would say the safest thing to do is, when you go to a new place as a leader, what are the ways in which they're measuring their student growth or measuring learning? Is it comparable to the last place you were at? Is it better? Are they doing well? Are they still matriculating students to universities? Are kids getting education, seeming pretty happy and moving forward? If so, slow down. If so, take that as a sign that you are not going to be a superhero, and that's not your job. Your job is to come in and be a leader, and those are different things. So the story that I told at the beginning, and the assessment to make and perspective to have, is that oftentimes we come into a new situation, and if that situation is different than what we've seen before, we try to make that a crisis. And we almost busy ourselves with the idea that everything is, because it's easier. It's easier to say things are messed up and I've got to fix them because, well, there's a little bit of safety there. There's always an out. Things were messed up when I got here. So if they stay messed up or things don't get better very quickly, it's because it was such a crisis. But what if you go into a place and you say, it's not a bad job. There are some good people here. There's some great teachers. There's some teachers who might need a little work. Kids are learning. Could they be doing better? That's probably always the case. So what you actually have to do now is real leadership. What you actually have to do now is figure out, where am I? Figure out the place, learn it, and then make judgments about little steps, little iterative steps that can slowly but surely bring progress to that school, that organization, and those people. How do you make situation and people better bit by bit without calling into question their entire professionalism and everything else? This person who I was speaking to, this assistant principal, she was damaging her relationship with her boss for no reason. She might have been, in the way that she was approaching teachers, she was approaching them as if their professionalism was in question without good cause. And when we do that, we can really hurt not just our development as a leader, but the relationships that we are able to build within the school, which we know moves everybody forward. So take that into consideration whenever you're going to a new place. Different is not a crisis. It's our job as leaders to learn, to ask questions, and to make situations and people better. Be good.